Clyde cleaned up the dishes from the dinner, with Irving feeling very satisfied with the chaos he had caused. His sister deserved better, and he would try to get her to see that. Isabel noticed that the dollhouse had been destroyed after her betrothed left her home. Her immediate thought was that her younger brother destroyed the toy to make her life more difficult. She was very upset that her siblings were not supportive of the man that would soon be her husband. She was supportive of everything her siblings did and expected the same courtesy from them. She took her frustrations out on Clyde and yelled at him to stop meddling in her life and future. Clyde was confused by her accusations. Joseph grabbed a few drinks to celebrate the success of the dinner with Irving. He praised his daughter for being polite and complacent of Irving. He thanked her for being a good daughter, unlike her twin. Isabel attempted to ask about the comments that Irving made about their wedding night, but he brushed her off and told her not to ask questions. She briefly felt sad that her problems weren't being listened to. That night, Isabel received a visit from her mother, who wanted her to be careful of Irving. Victoria wrote in her journal every single day. She would write in depth about the anguish she felt about being forced to marry an old man and not to the love of her life. This journal was her safe haven in this house of horrors. The little work that Isabel did now was simply to clean up her siblings' messes so her last few years on the farm would be peaceful. Richard and Esmeralda's wedding plans had been pushed back a few weeks due to his father being ill. Thaddeus made a full recovery, so Richard decided to plan an elaborate proposal to make his future with. He felt wanted and loved. Esmeralda couldn't wait to marry this man. She did not have a great start to her life due to the deaths of her mother and twin sister, but she knew her luck would turn around once she married the love of her life and had babies of her own. Isabel stood in front of the wedding arch before her sister's wedding and daydreamed about what her wedding day would look like with Irving. The twins watched their sister getting married with mixed emotions. Neither were happy for their sister, but had different reasons. Isabel wished that it was her getting married, while Victoria plastered a fake smile on her face to hide the disgust that Esmeralda was about to be owned by someone. Esmeralda and Richard admittedly felt very awkward professing their love to one another in front of their families. Not because they didn't love each other, but because those intimate feelings should only be for the two of them. Richard promised to be a faithful and attentive husband who would always be her safe haven. Esmeralda promised to honor him and respect him as long as she lived. They exchanged rings, Richard giving Esmeralda the ring that Thaddeus had bought for Kathleen before her untimely passing. It pleased Thaddeus that the ring was finally on the hand of a Bennett woman. Their first kiss in front of their families resulted in them butting heads. Most couples would be embarrassed by this, but they were too in love and happy to care. Now introducing Mr. and Mrs. Richard Lockhart, the newlyweds ventured off on their own, away from their wedding guests. They wanted a moment between just the two of them. They shared their first dance together and whispered all of the intimate vows that they chose not to share during their wedding, the words just for them. Joseph, Victoria, Isabel, and Clyde leave the wedding chapel as a family of 4. Life was relatively uneventful during the years following Esmeralda's wedding. Joseph has been having trouble securing a potential husband for Victoria because she has been labeled difficult to manage. The only hope that Joseph had for the future was Clyde aging into a teenager. He was one step close to having the heir he has always wanted. Clyde, on the other hand, had been dreading this day for a long time. Getting older meant more responsibility on the farm. Clyde's teenage trait is that he is self-conscious. Years of demands from his father have made him unsure of himself. His teenage aspiration is to be a country caretaker. His heart wasn't really in this aspiration. He did not want to disappoint his father, so he made being a farmer his dream. Clyde asked to take Esmeralda's old living quarters outside of the house so he was able to get some space from his father. He built a painter's easel out of scrap pieces of fencing. It brought him comfort to have an outlet that wasn't dictated by his father. Even though Victoria started playing the violin out of spite, she was now excellent. Playing the instrument brought her a sense of escape and comfort when her life seemed inescapable. Isabel, on the other hand, stopped playing the violin when Irving began to court her. She enjoyed to make music, but she had more important skills to work on before she got married to Irving. She began to practice her cross-stitch technique, but she found it dreadful. Joseph had done such a great job at being a dictator to his children that he often ate alone because they did not want to be around him. It was a lonely life to be a good father to his children. Joseph found education to be a waste of time, so Clyde was not allowed to continue his education. This decision freed up several more hours in the day for Clyde to work in the fields. Clyde begged to continue to go to school, but to no avail. He wanted to do a formidable job to make his father proud. He wished he was doing anything else. He loathed getting his hands dirty and could barely feel his legs by the end of the day. Joseph had made it more difficult for Victoria to sneak out of the house to see Jacob because Isabel was given the bedroom next to the stairs. Victoria wrote in her diary about her frustration of her sister tattling on her if she tried to leave. She truly was in prison. Isabel was given small tasks around the home now that Esmeralda was living with her husband. She was in charge of cooking and laundry, and Victoria was forced to do everything else. One day, when the rest of the family took a trip into town, Victoria finally had the chance to sneak out of the house to see her beloved Jacob. She stared at the man she loved and felt such heartbreak. The reality of their star-crossed lovers situation really began to sink in. Jacob swam around without a care in the world. He snuck up on Victoria and splashed her, successfully getting her out of her morbid thoughts. They began to giggle with one another, and the scary thoughts of the future melted away. Victoria felt such peace when she was in Jacob's presence, something she had never felt at home. She vowed right then that she would do everything she could to have her happily ever after with the love of her life. Victoria kissed Jacob with everything she had. She loved him so much, and she knew exactly how she wanted her life to play out, and she would fight for it. Just when Clyde thought his father could not control any more of his life, he pulls a fast one on him. Joseph began to speak to his son about having his own heir early in life. He asked Clyde to accompany him to meet a potential client that he knew better than that. He smoked a cigarette in preparation for the arranged meeting with a woman of his father's choosing to take place. Clyde was frustrated and could now understand what it felt like to have his love life out of his hands, like his sister's. Joseph arrived and was quickly followed by a young woman, no more than 25 years of age. Clyde could see that she was beautiful, and she seemed friendly enough, but he would not let his father choose who he would marry. That's where he drew a line. To appease his father, he politely conversed with a woman, who he learned was named Summer. She was dreadfully boring and only wanted to talk about farming, something that Clyde could not stand. He gave his father this chance to prove him wrong, that he really knew his own son's taste in women, but he failed miserably. He finally put his foot down and stood up to his father that he would not marry a woman of his choosing. As Clyde walked out of the pub, he felt lighter and more confident in himself than he ever had. Maybe his future was in his own hand, after all. Joseph did not want to be rude and leave this poor woman unattended because of his selfish son's actions, so he stays at the pub and talks with Summer. He quickly realizes that they have a lot in common. It is like the ice from his previously cold heart began to melt away as Summer continued to speak and smile at him. For the first time in over 10 years, He had butterflies in his stomach and was stumbling over his words. Maybe it was a blessing in disguise that his son was not interested in courting Summer. Maybe he should court this beautiful woman who had the same appreciation for farming that he did. He brought this up immediately with the young beauty, realizing he was getting older and did not have a moment to waste. Summer loved the sound of this, and they went into the parlor to get more cozy and speak of the specifics. Joseph was adamant that he would pay any dowry her father desired because he was about to come into a great deal of money. Summer accepted all of his terms, very happy that she would not have to scour the town for a suitable bachelor because one literally fell into her lap. When Joseph returned home from his magical afternoon with Summer, he immediately went to Clyde's living quarters to give him a piece of his mind. Clyde disrespected his future stepmother, and that was unacceptable. Clyde was unhappy with his father, too. The father and son argued for a long time about the boundaries that Clyde has finally set in place for his father. After much debate, Joseph agreed not to meddle in Clyde's romantic life if he agreed to put more effort into being a good farmer. Joseph told the news of his new courtship to the only person in his family that cared enough to listen, his dear Isabel. Isabel was shocked that her father was courting a woman who was only a few years older than Esmeralda. She found the whole thing strange, but she could not mistake the complete personality change her father has made after only one afternoon with this woman. Maybe this was the best thing for her father after all. Because her father was even more strict than before. She was exhausted during the night due to all of the farm work, so she slept when she would normally meet her beloved Jacob. She hasn't seen the love of her life in months. Victoria's life was pure agony for the past several months. Her father was even more stringent about tending to the animals and making sure the farm is spotless because of his ridiculous courtship with a girl whom was not much older than herself. Isabel made an eloquent dinner and set the table for their houseguest, Summer. This was the first time that the Bennett sisters would meet the child bride. Tensions were high, but Isabel reminded her siblings how to act. Victoria was angry that her sister spoke to her like she was a child. The beginning of the dinner was relatively quiet due to the children's disinterest of Summer and Joseph's nervousness. He forgot how to behave in front of an attractive woman, so instead he stayed silent. Clyde wanted no part of the dinner, so after making an appearance, he told the table that he wasn't feeling well. He, in fact, felt fine. He chose to spend his time doing things that didn't make him want to pull out his hair. The dinner took a turn for the worst when Isabel tried to make small talk with her twin by asking about why her dowry had diminished significantly in the last year, far less than her own. Victoria took this comment as Isabel claiming she is more desirable than her. Joseph knew that this was an argument that needed to happen, so instead of intervening, he suggested that he and Summer go into the living room to enjoy more time together. After he and Summer vacate the table, the argument becomes explosive. Every little jab at the other that they had ever kept to themselves was brought to the surface. The loathing and resentment from both sisters was finally spoken out loud. Their relationship was now difficult. Meanwhile, in the living room, the newly courting couple chose to ignore the ridiculousness of the girls and focus on their budding romance. Their chemistry was almost tangible, and Joseph wanted to be close to the younger woman. Summer played beautiful music for him on the piano. He never really cared for music before, but he was deeply moved by the melodies he was hearing. He was falling for Summer even faster than he had for Mia all those years ago. Joseph escorted Summer into his bedroom where they shared stolen kisses. He would not dishonor her by consummating their union before their wedding day. That is what cursed he and Mia's union. Jacob began to worry that Victoria had stopped loving him and decided to go through the arranged marriage, or worse. Something terrible had happened to her, so he snuck onto the farm after dark. Victoria was shocked but overjoyed to see her beloved searching her home for her. However, when Jacob realized she was okay, he got extremely upset and terrified that this meant that Victoria did not love him anymore. Victoria explained the situation with her father and begged Jacob to forgive her for not having the energy to go to their secret spot on the dock at night anymore. Jacob felt awful for her and forgave her without a second thought, grateful that she was safe and healthy at least. Victoria clung to Jacob as they continued to converse in hushed tones so to not wake the others. Victoria now knew of a way for them to be together, at least for right now. He would sneak in the house at night as he did this night. Isabel wrote to her beloved Irving and begged him to move up the date of their wedding so that she could get out of this house. Their current date for their nuptials was a few weeks after her 19th birthday due to traveling and business ventures on Irving's part. Clyde was tired of the monotonous routine of harvesting the crops, which was quickly followed by planting seeds for the next harvest. This work was meaningless, not thought-provoking. He wished he could do something that had meaning and enriched the lives of others. Victoria and Jacob went through with their plan for the man to sneak in. The first few times were nerve-wracking yet exhilarating. She also enjoyed that it was done under her father's nose. Part of all of this did make her extremely sad though. Jacob was in her home and saw how she lived, and yet her father would never allow him to be a part of this world. He would never allow her to be with Jacob. One of these nights Victoria felt very sentimental about their situation and how they would never get to experience a wedding night. Victoria suggested that they experience a night together like it was their wedding night. Jacob was hesitant at first because he did not want to dishonor the woman he loved. Victoria countered that the sanctity of marriage was built off of love, and that is all the more reason to. She wanted to show how much she loved Jacob through actions, not just words. The lovebirds experience their first time together. Their touches are shy and unsure at first, but that desire and primal instinct show them the way. Unfortunately, their first time is interrupted by Joseph. He had been awoken by the creaking of Victoria's bed and feared there was an intruder in their home. What he walked into was so much worse than he imagined. Joseph screamed the boy to get off of his daughter. When Jacob was dressed and about to flee from the farm, Joseph punches the boy with all of his might. However, he was angry at the boy not because he deflowered his daughter, but because this act just costed him a handsome dowry. Isabel woke up from all of the yelling and crying. She was shocked and dismayed by what she walked into. It was pure chaos. Victoria rushed down the stairs to follow Jacob out of the home to run away with him, but her father stopped her. Victoria smiled at him because she knew this act of love between she and Jacob ruined every chance. Joseph had had a payday. She screamed at her father that she would never become the daughter that he wanted her to be, and he should simply give up on trying to change her. Joseph stared at his daughter with a blank expression on his face before he strikes her across the face. He did many cruel things to his children, but he had never hit them. Victoria is shocked and heartbroken that this has happened. Joseph tells her to leave the farm and to never return. She was now defective and no man would want to marry her. He had no use for her any longer. Jacob was outside of the farm's borders when he found Victoria and told her that he had a plan to run away. His cousin and his wife were willing to open their home to them on the condition that they both find work. After they settled into the home, Victoria felt relief. She was finally where she wanted to be, in the comfort of Jacob's embrace and away from her wicked father. She had everything she ever wanted, but still, she was sad that her family relationships were destroyed. Their first time being intimate with one another was interrupted, so they decided to try again. This time together was much more sure and passionate. Victoria could now be with this man for the rest of her life.